Hello, I'm Carolyn Holzman, and this is Confessions of an SEO. This episode is brought to you by Indexilla, the brainchild of my indexation research and testing. It's based on proprietary technology that doesn't rely on any single search engine's API while ensuring more reliable and consistent results. You can find it at indexilla.io. Now on the show, I talk a lot about SEO in various forms: SEO testing, stories, rants, new things. And not for the first time, this week is going to be about indexing. Specifically, interpreting an article that was published on February 28th on indexcheckr.com in their blog section. Now, I'm going to probably, in fact, I know I will, break this up into 2 episodes. Next week, I will be on the road, and I don't want to leave you hanging too much. Welcome back to Confessions of an SEO, Season 5, Episode 9. This is Part 1. When I heard about the article based on the indexation data of 16 million pages in Google, well, you know me well enough by now to know not to get between me and an article about indexation data. Anyone listening who doesn't know my work, I sort of live, breathe, and eat indexation. What is it? How does it happen? How long does it take? The difference between indexed and served, server logs, robots text files, search console, yada yada. Today actually is day 1269 of consecutive indexation testing. And yes, that is over 3 full years. In fact, only 9 more days out from being officially 3.5 years. I may have missed a day here and there, but mostly I hit them. My data has been refined over the time, but even then, it is not 16 million pages. And to be fair, the folks who run Indexcheckr aren't in control of all those 16 million pages. In fact, one critical item that I may have missed, I'll have to find out, where did they get these 16 million URLs? Now, I'm guessing it's from all the URLs over the years that have been submitted by users, and I could be wrong. And for that reason, I've reached out to them to ask, and I will let you know what they say when I hear back. Now, first part of this article is to provide a sort of general current state of indexing as evidenced by serving data. Now, I say serving data because I doubt any of these URLs are so much within their control, or we'd be having a more nuanced conversation about them. So based on what I'm seeing, I'm going to go out on the limb and be fairly confident that we're not getting any Search Console data involved on the specific URLs. I'll go more into that. But basically, they split the results into 3 buckets. If the domain itself was not in the SERPs, that would be marked as domain not indexed. If it was a page from a domain that was not served in the SERPs, but the domain was served, they would mark that page as not indexed. But if it was a page from a domain that was served, and so the page was served, and you could find it in the SERPs, that was tagged as indexed page. Now, already, I'm going to be honest with you, we're on a slippery slope with one of these. Any guesses on which one? I will get to that later. So, needless to say, I very much respect this kind of work. 16 million pages, and going with what we got, the SERPs. All right. So, here's the nitty-gritty. According to their criteria, under the heading of domain not indexed is about 1% of those URLs. Page not indexed was about 62%, and page indexed about 37%. Now, that's not exactly how I would have tagged them, right? I would have said domain not served, page not served, and page served. So, and I say that because I know how pages can be marked as indexed in Search Console, but not served. So I'm looking at that 62%, and I'm kind of putting it in quotes. You know, when you put things in quotes, it's kind of like maybe, maybe not. So you can see here how much as an industry we really need to level up on our terminology. I don't think we can put a sharp enough point on this aspect of the indexation system that our content can be marked as indexed in Search Console, but not visible in SERPs. And right now, when things are not visible in SERPs, we call that not indexed. But yet when you find situations like that and you go look at that URL in Search Console, you're more likely going to find out that it's marked as indexed. Certainly that's been my experience, and it's almost been my daily experience for almost 3.5 years. Now, they point to, once they kind of go through their data, they sort of come up with some sort of summary or conclusion on why we're seeing what we're seeing. And interestingly, they point to AI-generated content, and I agree to a point. And now we're going to have a content conversation here. In my testing, there appears to be a threshold for indexing and a separate threshold for serving. Considering the goal here is to get our content findable, I am very interested in that threshold to the serving. Is it because content indexed but not served is low quality? Low quality by whose standards? Is it unhelpful? Unhelpful to whom? Is it unoriginal content? Read that as code word for AI generated. And now that I've started on content, let's dig just a little deeper. I'm going to get up on my little soapbox, because most of the time when I read about content, it's presented in such a way that it's 100% burden on the writer to provide high quality, helpful, original content. There is absolutely no ink or space given to figuring out how does an algorithm that doesn't read, even though it's good at figuring out topics, but how does an algorithm identify low quality content? At least in terms of indexation, or into this case, a threshold to serving. How can content be high enough quality, helpful, and original to index in Search Console, but not be high enough quality, helpful enough, and original enough to make it through the entire serving system? You can see now how fun I am at parties. All right, so here's an incoming editorial, which I freely admit. I think what we're seeing is not an answer to, are we good enough? I think it's, are we playing with Google's requirements well enough? If I read one more declaration that it's our lack of authoritativeness as to why we can't get our content served, I think I'm gonna puke. These guys didn't say this in the article, right? But sometimes I need to get this stuff out of my system so I can go back to being impartial, or sort of impartial. All right, so they did mention the end of 2023 when Google claimed 45% of the content in the search results. Now, I do think they claimed that in April of last year, 2024. But in the article, what they're talking about is this last standalone helpful content update before it was added into the core algorithm, right? So it was September 2023 when a lot of sites were choked to death. They just were kicked out of the index and dropped 95% of everything. Impressions, clicks, money, everything. So for myself, I don't see that this is because of low value or AI generated content. And from what I see, it's because of outdated keyword research. Now, if you haven't listened to last week's episode, which was all about how I'm calling it trad research, how trad research is failing us. It was inspired by an article by Dale Bertrand, and put the link in the description. And not for nothing, table of content links that Google crawled as links and that the helpful content system treated as separate pages, and thus duplicate content exponentially attributed to the site, you can see I don't think Google taught the helpful content system and classifier to take into account that table of content links are basically children of the canonical, and thus they are not separate. But it's also because, have you ever tried to get a page that only had 48 words on it to get served? I have, and it hasn't worked for a while. Now, that might very well fit the definition of low-value content. What do you think? And on a side note, this article actually uses table of content links. Now, I'm going to start tracking pages like this when I find them. It's only been right now, it'll be less than a week since it was published, so there's not a lot of data on what it's ranking for. But I think I'm going to keep track of this one. All right, Chapter 2, Indexing Trends Over the Years. Now, they have a chart in there that no matter which way I slice it, I really can't get it all to add up to a number that totals 16 million. I get 14.8 million, yes, but not 16 million. So might need to ask them about that. But, if this data is based on the same 16 million, I'll let you know what they tell me. Now, the general message within this section is that Google is getting more pages indexed in 2025. Now, mind you, we're just 2 months in, but the chart shows a larger proportion of pages being indexed versus non-indexed. I don't know if Google is getting better, but given that Google acknowledged after the April 2024 core and spam updates that they removed over more than they expected out of the index, that kind of removal is going to cause a shift in that proportion of served pages and non-served or non-indexed content, as they call it. Now, this part of the article is mainly speculation, with valiant attempts to explain the correlation. I'll be honest. It's a little cringeworthy because they talk about this as if these two things are connected. And I know I like to speculate as much as the rest of us as SEOs, but we do know some things. Like we do know that in 2021, a large part of the year, JavaScript was offline, broken or turned off. I wish I could tell you. Now, we won't know unless one of you creates a time machine so that I can go back and do some indexation tests. But what they didn't sort of speculate on is that during the time up to the time in question, Google was moving to a mobile-first indexing. How soon we forget what took Google over 7 years to do. On October 31st, 2023, Google announced that they had completed this project. Just so happens, I was testing prior to that. And you know what was happening before that date? We had two types of sites in Search Console. There were some that were mobile or smartphone primary crawlers, and some that were desktop primary crawlers. Remember those? It wasn't that long ago. Now, my indexation data during that time revealed that the indexation rates between these two designations of sites were quite different. Mobile primary had a much higher percentage of indexation. So I looked up, I knew I had it written down. So I looked up, and these were comparing the two from April 17th to September 3rd, 2023. Okay, so it's right up to that last helpful content update. The desktop for simple HTML had a serving rate of 63%. Mobile for that same period was 94%. For JavaScript, desktop had a serving rate of 68%. Mobile for the same period was 88%. Significantly higher on the mobile primary or the smartphone primary crawler sites. So then we get August 31st, and wham, all of our sites are made mobile first. Well, yeah, based on the data, it makes sense. You'd see more pages getting served, and that sure as hell would explain how that proportion got greater for served pages. That can explain the data without anyone writing more valuable or more experiential content, literally by not changing a word. Okay, I'm going to close things here. That's it for me this week. I'll have part 2 next week. Indexzilla is the indexing platform to get your content and backlinks indexed, and it is so compliant to Google's terms of service. It's safe for every type of link, even your money site. You can find it at indexzilla.io. If you do need help with your site and you're not sure where to dig, contact my office. My specialty is forensic SEO. Does this mean I'll bring you something you've never seen before or thought of before? Maybe. But the value is in the perspective based on experience and testing. To stay on the cutting edge of the state of indexing, check out Crawl or No Crawl on Substack. You can find it by searching Crawl or No Crawl. It's even got its own knowledge graph. Thank you for being a listener. I hope I can count on you coming back next week for part 2. And if you have any questions about today's topic, you can reach out and text to Confessions at 512-222-3132. Thanks again, and until next week, I'll see you in the SERPs.